It's Friday here on Locked On Dolphins, and it's time for Power to the Pod. All of your most pressing questions around the team. We're getting into them here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and an NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. I want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, 2 new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Power to the pod, making a return this week. Fan Mailbag. Speaking of Touchdown Miami, that collection is a large pool of the questions that we're going to be diving into here today on the show. I did an Asante Samuel film study on Touchdown Miami yesterday, and while I'm very risk adverse to the injury background with a shoulder and with a neck procedure this spring, the skill set is apparent, and I would very easily be able to talk myself into the risk being worth the reward, depending on the price point and how much they like the other young corners they have in the room. But we're still playing the waiting game at corner, and we're going to get into that a little bit later in the show. But I want to start with the question that came through from Patrick. It says, I hate that this has to be the discussion, but what would your next step be if Tua Tagovailoa misses a significant amount of playing time in 2025? Is cutting or trading him an option? Is there a ripple effect that would ignite a full-on rebuild again? Do you think McDaniel and or Greer would still be around? So a lot of layers to this question. And it's an unsavory topic, right? I think what the Dolphins did, the contract with Tua Tagovailoa, they kind of put themselves in a position where this was either going to be a one and done and you were going to take like a $50 million bath and move on this offseason, or it was going to be a 3-year deal. Now, if he misses a significant amount of playing time in the first 2 years of this new contract, I think this would be the offseason in which you would see the Dolphins probably try to opportunistically bring somebody else in. Now, their opportunities to do that might be limited because they have resources tied into the contract of Tua Tagovailoa. But if they were on the board and if Tua misses time and the season's a disaster, it's supposed to be a good quarterback class. Do they fall in love with one of those guys? Could you see this team going up and get one of those guys and kind of having a year overlap with the incumbent versus the kind of the Jimmy G, Trey Lance is just a Shanahan tree type of example? Yeah, I could see that being the realm in which we're living in if Tua were to miss a significant amount of time. And I'm hoping that's not the case because I would love to see the players that are here. I am of the school of thought of I like to love the one you're with, right? And put him in the best position to be successful, but that has to be reciprocal. And that means Tua's got to protect himself a little better when he's outside of structure of plays. Do I think McDaniel and or Greer would still be around? I think Chris Greer, in the world and realm in which the Tua contract goes nuclear in successive seasons, for how long Chris has been around. Chris was here for the decision to pick Tua, whereas Mike was brought in to fix Tua. I think Mike McDaniel would have a much stronger argument to say, let me pick. You pick me because I was the guy for the quarterback you had in place. But if we're going to go back to square one here, let me pick my guy in that scenario. So I would see it much more likely that if they were to do any kind of partial reset and not get everybody out of the building in one shot, I would kind of be inclined to think that Mike would have at least a decent leg to stand on, depending on how bad things got in 2025. Alan, you've discussed the backup situation at quarterback a few times, but how do you feel about that position in comparison to the last few years? I like the upside potential with Zach Wilson. And Zach Wilson, the difference between him and Mike White and Skylar Thompson, like Zach's obviously a much more physically gifted and talented player. I think he's a more physically gifted player than Teddy Bridgewater. The difference between Zach and Teddy, and I don't know which one's air quotes better here, but the difference between Zach and Teddy for me is Zach has a long-term outcome and untapped potential that could serve as your get out of jail free card, like you saw what it was the Bucks with Baker Mayfield, and it was Geno Smith in Seattle, and it was Sam Darnold with the Vikings. You see all these examples of these quarterbacks that didn't have early success, but very clearly had physical talent, and they go through the ringer a little bit, and then they come out the other side of it, and they get the maturation and the development that they need by being exposed to different kinds of systems, and then they get the right opportunity with the right guys around them, and boom, we're off and running, right? Like, that's the appeal for Zach Wilson. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think statistically speaking and probabilities-wise, it's probably pretty low that happens because there's more guys that hit that adversity early in their careers and don't make it than do make it, right? But that appeal with a guy that has the physical passing ability, like the raw arm talent that Zach has, is I think the best kind of way that you could position yourself, especially with the quarterback that you do have, has the durability questions that exist. Joseph says, Wingfield mentioned he thinks Weaver will be a head coach candidate in the near future. Do you have the same high opinion of him? He sounds like a great player developer, but is there anything special schematically you're looking forward to seeing going into his second year? I think, and the longer I get into this, the more I really covet the non-X's and O's elements of your candidacy as a head coaching possible hire. And Weaver certainly, I think, has he's a player's coach, but he's stern and he's direct and he's compassionate. Like, he's the kind of player's coach that can give you tough love when you need tough love, but then also knows when to love up on guys. And that, along with connections and relationships, and he's very well connected on the defensive side of the ball with the Wink Martindales of the world and the Jesse Minters of the world and the Mike McDonalds of the world, and just the coaches that he was around in his time in Baltimore, and even going back before that with Rex Ryan and that coaching tree. Feel pretty good about his ability to have connections and put together a good staff. So yes, I do think Anthony Weaver is a very strong candidate to be a head coaching hire. Now, the challenge is some of these defensive coaches, was Vance Joseph was kind of this way. Ajiro Vera was this way as two really hot name defensive coordinators who never really had the right opportunity at the right time. And Vance, I kind of see similarly from like his demeanor, his relationships with his players, I see similarly to Anthony Weaver. So as far as the scheme, I want to see what it looks like when you got a lot of dogs that can hunt up front, right? And Weaver talked about that during his press availability early this weekend, and having Chubb and Phillips and Chop all on the field at the same time, or being available all at the same time. We haven't seen we've never seen those three overlap with each other. We haven't seen Chubb and Phillips since Black Friday in 2023, right? It's been a minute. So what that group looks like, I think, can really allow you to get more exotic on the back end. I have more questions from Touchdown Miami's collection and group. There's a chat as a part of that membership. That's a great opportunity to stop in every once in a while. You guys chat amongst yourselves. It's really fun. So we're going to get to more questions from the mailbag next here on Locked on Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on all of the action than right now with FanDuel. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways to play than ever before to win smart and win big. And if you like free money, you can get a $200 bonus bet when you hit your first $5 bet with FanDuel. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, back over here on Touchdown Miami. John wants to know, is there a world where Melifonwu plays primarily at corner this year? More generally, could we use 3 safeties and Kader Kohu as our back-end player with no other true corner on the field? So if you're not familiar, Melifonwu's college background was at corner, and he came in the league and played transition to play safety. I think there are packages and certain personnel groups and certain matchups on a week-to-week basis where you could justify matching Melifonwu like you would a corner. Now, I don't think he's going to just live as an outside corner, because the great appeal, and that was another player we did a film study on over on Touchdown Miami. The great appeal with him, in my opinion, is the versatility and the fact that he can play man coverage, but he can play split field coverage. He can play intermediate zones. He can fit the run. He's long. He can pressure. You can do a lot with him. Now, the consistency of finishing those plays is something to focus on. And there's a durability element, which, surprise, there's a player with a durability element who plays for the Dolphins, right? But I think you'd be doing him a disservice to just play him at corner. But if you told me you had a game plan where it said, hey, we're going to play big, we want 3 safeties on the field, and depending on if we're getting man-to-man coverage calls or certain down and distance calls, if he's going to play outside and line up outside. Like that's a part of his lexicon. That's part of the appeal of him as a player. And not every safety can say that. Nathan wants to know, what has to happen for all of McDaniel, Greer, and Tua to be back next season? That's an interesting question, because I think everybody's at different levels of their breaking point as it pertains to continuing to see the course and see the path with this. I think this team has to overachieve this year. And the good news is everybody's expectations seem like they're pretty down. So overachieving relative to the expectations of the last few years is to probably have at least a similar style year to what you had in the past few years, not 2024 either. I think you're looking for winning record. I think you're looking for Tua to obviously stay very healthy, although I think Tua will be back with the team next year. It's more so how serious the Dolphins pursue what would be a hedge. And if he stays healthy, and then you could say, hey, he stayed healthy in 2 of the last 3 seasons, maybe that comes off the table altogether, right? That's the best thing that Tua could do for himself. But I think contractually, Tua will probably be here regardless of the situation next year. But it's a matter of the hedge. As far as Chris and Mike, Mike's got to show some growth in some areas that have been frustrating non-areas of growth. And this roster has to stay healthy. And I think you have to have a lot more hits than you had misses as far as the bets that you placed in free agency. And the draft has to show that it's connected to the direction of the team. I hate to just put it on wins and losses, right? Because I don't think that conversation is quite that simple. Our next question in this block comes from Josh. Would you rather sign Asante Samuel Jr. or trade for Browns corner Greg Newsome? Newsome does not have neck and shoulder issues and didn't play in 4 games last year. I think that's the appeal to Greg Newsome. And I like both players. The downside to Greg Newsome is you have to send an asset to acquire him in the first place. And he's going to cost you more cash this year. Right now, he's a young player. He's in the prime of his career. But he's playing on a 5th-year option this year that's fully guaranteed, and it's like $13 million. Now, so you'd be trading for a player that either you're playing on that price point and then leaving open to not re-signing, and then you traded for a player that played for you 1 year in the midst of a youth movement who would then leave, or you'd have to be trading for a player who you acquire and immediately give a second contract to. And that's been part of the problem is you paid some guys without proof of concept and you want to give the money to the right people. That's the whole big picture conversation we're having right now on the heels of how the Dolphins got in the shoes that they're in. So I think Asante Samuel Jr., even amid the risk, is the proper play because you could sign him on a one-year deal. There's risk involved, but there's also risk involved with the Newsome deal, and you're losing assets in that regard. And then if Samuel hits and you're worried about the long-term viability, but he plays well for you, which I think if he's healthy, he's very capable of playing well for you, you can either commit to him, or if you have concerns about the neck and the shoulder, you can let him walk and then play the game that you've played where the last 3 years they have not been active big spenders in free agency, which I think is a good thing. And they're probably going to be focused on having another big draft class and another infusion of cost-controlled players. And like they're not giving out big contracts and haven't in the last 3 years. I think the last 3 years, there's only been one player that's gotten any guaranteed money in the second year of their free agent contract. Right. So you could potentially play the compensatory pick game again after you did it with Javon Holland this year in a much more passive way than what you did in 2024 when you did it with Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins. So I think if you were going to tell me those are your two options to improve corner, the right answer for me is Asante Samuel Jr. And if you want to know why, you can watch the film study, which we dive headfirst into Asante Samuel Jr. tape. And man, there's a lot to like from like a foot speed, pedal, vision zone, route recognition combination. You could tell his dad was a really successful football player, and then it's kind of in his DNA. But I won't give too much of it away. So that would be my answer out of those two. Now, our next question comes from Finn's OG. With 0 players authentically making the Pro Bowl last year, right? Jonnu Smith was a replacement. What players are most likely to have a season worthy of the selection this year? It's tough because from a pass rush perspective, I think that's a group that can be a very potent group. But it's a very crowded group in the AFC. And Chubb hadn't played in a year. Phillips, Chop. Do they all eat into their own numbers where nobody gets the sexy numbers because this team is probably going to be back to, although they do have significant amount of primetime exposure this year. So that might play to their advantage. I would hope Jordan Brooks makes it. If everybody just stops assuming that PFF's grades are the be-all, end-all for linebacker play. I mean, they've never graded Jordan Brooks as a good player. He's an outstanding talent. I think that's a great name on the defensive side of the ball for me would be Jordan Brooks. And then offensively, I think Jonnu Smith has a chance. I think Tyreek Hill has a chance to at least have a bounce back year that would put him at 1,300 yards. If he keeps himself on the straight and narrow, knock on wood. Devon Achane. And you never know. Like, I mean, if Tua stays healthy, Tua put up Pro Bowl numbers, passed for big time numbers. Like a healthy Tua for 17 games, if you told me he had it, even if you ran the ball at a little bit higher clip, if you told me he passed for 4,200 yards and 28 plus touchdowns, I would not bet against it with the offensive weaponry that they have and an improved offensive line. And if he's available to stay on the field. So those would be probably the first and foremost names for me. And Tyreek Hill more so, like he's a player even off the down year would get the benefit of the doubt if he put up numbers that are a little bit more in line with his career numbers. We have some more questions incoming, including a question about what happens if the Dolphins find themselves between a rock and a hard place with Jalen Ramsey. We're going to get into that next. Stick with us. This question comes from, I believe it's Dan. Where'd you go? No, this one's from Bracken. You're Chris Greer. June 1st is coming on, and there are no reasonable trade offers for Jalen Ramsey. The season is imminent. What do you do? This is not going to be a popular answer for some. I see zero value in keeping players that do not want to be here when you are trying to rebuild the culture of the football team. So me personally, I'm taking whatever bag of chips I can get to not pay Jalen Ramsey $21 million more this season, because there's a year-over-year impact from that. But then also, all of the best teams, when they get to kind of midway through or late in their postseason run, and then like all NFL teams this time of year, and they're asked about like all the best teams and what this team needs to do, and they talk about like the care and the investment in one another. If you have a player that's getting more cash than almost anybody on the team, what third highest cash recipient if he stayed and played this year, be $25 million. That player with that level of investment not being bought into what you're doing, like he's a with all due respect to Jalen Ramsey, as a 30-year-old corner, you're a depreciating asset at the NFL level. So you're going to hold, like, I'm just not so pick me that it's like, oh, we have this great player and I refuse to give him away. You're going to stay and play with us. Like, the entire theme of the offseason for this football team has been, we want everybody to be bought in on what we're doing, because people weren't last year and it was a problem. So to just pull the wool over your eyes and pretend like that didn't exist because of the talent of the player, I'd rather have a lesser talent and not pay $21 million and set myself up for years to come when I feel confident in the direction that the team is going and the people that are making the decisions, to have those kinds of flexibility and that kind of asset and have that credit back in their pocket. And give yourself a chance to have a team that's maybe not as talented, but is a better team. I know there's a lot of Dolphins fans that very vehemently disagree with that idea and say, like, why would you give away a player like this for nothing? You traded Hunter Long in a 3 for him 2 years ago, and then he had a meniscus tear, missed half the season. And now apparently he's contributing to the problems you have behind the scenes. What do you mean you don't want to give away for nothing? You got him for nothing. And he held your feet to the fire for 2 years for compensation and fought the defensive coordinator tooth and nail, openly disobeyed his utilization. I don't know. If you're serious about trying to fix the culture of the team, and we celebrate and sit here and applaud that they got all these physical players, I'm not just going to sit here and pretend like the other problem that existed didn't exist because the player in question is a talented player. Like, and if I had my way, like, number 10 would have been out of here the first chance I got, too. And that's me playing looking at it from a long game, because for Mike McDaniel and Chris Greer, like, if things don't go well to a certain degree and you got that egg on your face for giving that contract out, like, you might be out of here and out of a job. So I get it's a more complicated discussion for them, but I'm going to be here next year no matter what, right? Like you can't fire me as a fan of the team. So me playing the long game and knowing, like, this isn't the last year of Miami Dolphins football that's ever going to exist, I would rather take the procedural steps to get it right and maybe be a less talented team, but be a better team. So that's how I would handle it. I don't have any reasonable trade offer. I don't care if it's a reasonable trade offer. I want Jalen Ramsey out of here, because I want players that want to be here and be proud of the name on the front of the jersey as much as the name on the back of the jersey, and are invested in doing the things necessary to make everybody that's associated with the name on the front of the jersey and the fans that's of the name on the front of the jersey be proud of the product that's on the field as a team. So I don't care if it's a reasonable offer. Now we're at the position where June 1st is where it's going to make sense to move him. Get him out of here after June 1st. I want players that want to be here, personally. You guys got me on the soapbox here. Our last question. Shot for Schultz. Who's your expected breakout player for 2025 and why? Can I say Jonas Savaiinaea? Does that count? I think he's an awesome fit for the scheme. I'm excited about him because I think it provides a broader menu where it's just like not authentically what they've been in the past. pathway for him to be what I think is a Rob Hunt. Rob Hunt made the Pro Bowl last year. Vindicated, right? Like that song back in the day. The big champion of Rob Hunt. I think Patrick Morris is a sneaky name here. I think Jalen Wright's a good name. I think Malik Washington's never going to be a volume player, but I think he could be one of those like X factor when people take your other stuff away, who makes the play and who consistently makes the play kind of guys. I think he could be Malik Washington. That's going to do it for us here today on the show, Kyle Krabs. Appreciate you all who chipped in with questions. If I did not get to your question, my apologies. I'm on a time constraint. But we got 25 great minutes of Miami Dolphins football talk in on a Friday, which means it's a great day. You could hit subscribe, come on back, see me again on Monday. We get anything crazy over the weekend, I'll do a show over the weekend as well. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Make it a great weekend. Talk to you all again soon. Go Fins.